All right, welcome back. Team On Location here, talking about On Location, Boys Town, Nebraska. Today, we have our first real episode. The goal here is to dive into just really who is Pat Friman. We'll maybe allude to at the end a few of the different characters that may have shown up and how that came about, without revealing too many secrets. And then what Boys Town was like when we were there. Try to paint you all like a mental image of what it looks like. So to start us off, let's just go straight with Pat Friman. We've talked about him, just a powerhouse.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Yes. I don't know, like he's been the most like giving, hardworking, kind person I've ever met, and like even when you see him on stage, you're just like, there's something about this guy.
But let me tell you though, because I've talked to a lot of people that have been colleagues with Pat for many, many years, and they will say the same thing that I'm going to say right now, which is that he's softened with age. Definitely, I've spoken to some people that were recipients of very harsh criticism from him when he was the editor of JABA, or if they worked with him when he was at University of Nevada, Reno, and they were one of his graduate students. And so I don't want to paint this picture like Pat is some angel, because as you guys will see in the documentary, he will tell you that he has come in very close contact with every one of the 7 deadly sins. And so Pat's a human. But what I think is really important about who he is his story is one of redemption. He'll tell you himself, he grew up in Montana. He got in a lot of trouble.
I want to hide some of these details.
Okay.
Though. So proceed cautiously around this one.
Okay, fine.
You're good.
But that he has, Pat will say that he's made so many different mistakes in his career, and how he has viewed things or perceived things in the past. And I think for so many of us, as we get into the more mature phase of our lives, we, often are able to reflect and I think soften some of our perspectives, because you understand that life is like really complex. And honestly, at the end of the day, we're just all trying to kind of like do right by each other as much as we can. And I feel like that's kind of like Pat's phase of life right now. And I think what he's really clued into is he's such a powerful speaker. He has amazing oratory skills. And I think he deeply, deeply understands that in this huge growth phase in behavior analysis right now, where there's all types of people coming into this field that are very different from the audience that he grew up with. He grew up with, researchers, basic scientists. He went to conferences where, everyone was a PhD, and they were really focused on, grant research and continuing to just have people even understand a little bit of what behavior analysis is, to now this massive field that is primarily practitioner based. And most of these practitioners are master's level behavior analysts, of which you and I both are, Ryan. Mm-hmm. And so I think he's understood the shift. He's understood the need for us to really continue to, be interested and really focus on the science of behavior analysis, but also I think really sees how incredibly important it is for the practitioner community, and that community is mostly people that work with people with autism spectrum disorder, developmental disabilities, and how important it is for us to be able to rally around each other, support each other, to continue to do better on behalf of the people that we are working with. And I think that's very visionary of him to be willing to do this. And to your earlier point, he is the most giving person. I mean, for someone to basically allow us to come into his work environment, and Pat has been at Boys Town for almost all of his professional career, and to give us essentially no holds barred access to everything.
Yeah.
And also then for everyone at Boys Town to welcome us with open arms, to be totally supportive of this project, to be willing to be vulnerable and be on camera sharing that with people that they don't know, is to me a testament to his leadership, and also a testament of how amazing this place is.
We can just probably end it there.
Episode done.
That was the episode.
That was painted so well. Let's take a pause there and talk. We'll come back around to some of Pat's accolades and things like that. Mm-hmm. Let's maybe shift into Boys Town. Like, can we paint a picture of when you roll up? I remember when we were heading out there the first time, in the car, you're driving down the road and you're like, you just wait until you see this place. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, It's a suburb. My perspective was like, oh, it's like the suburb of like Omaha. It's
Off
kind
a
of
freeway,
Yeah.
like whatever. There's like office buildings kind of around the area.
I was
Yeah.
like, nah, like it can't be that amazing. And then you pull in, you see the big tower on the side.
The water tower. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the big water tower. There's also that big stone like memorial
Mm-hmm.
that's set up, as well as the statue
Of Father Flanagan.
of Father Flanagan and such. And for me, it was like, oh, like this isn't what I expected necessarily, but this is what she was talking about.
Yeah.
Do you have anything when you showed up, Jarek, like that kind of
Well,
popped
it
out?
wasn't what I expected it to be. I thought you said it was like, oh, it's just a little town that have a lot of kids, and I thought it was gonna be a lot smaller than but it's like campus size.
Yeah.
Well, and also you have to keep in mind that when we first went there, we got literally the last good week of fall leaves. And Ryan and I had this conversation, and I was like, Ryan, that is like the whitest thing you can talk about right now is fall leaves. Like, who gives a crap about
It was beautiful.
But it was
was.
beautiful. So if we can like paint this picture to you guys that it's a crisp day, it's sunny outside. It was probably about 55 degrees. There's a light breeze blowing, and there are these beautiful kind of multicolored leaves that are like cascading down from the trees onto the campus of Boys Town. And we're just kind of slowly driving through, and you see, students walking to school. You see some kids getting ready for football practice because Boys Town actually has a pretty awesome football team. You see tourists coming to visit because there's a whole visitor center, and there's just this like air of calmness, but also warmth. And you're in the middle, you're right off a freeway in Omaha, Nebraska. Again, there's some office parks around there, but there's also like all these cornfields too.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know if you guys remember the movie Field of Dreams. Remember with
I do. Yeah.
with Kevin Costner, and it took place in Iowa. And there's a little kind of like Field of Dreams-esque vibe going on there that is just like this neat place in the middle of a cornfield. And all of a sudden there's this amazing community, and you can just drive straight through because again, there's no locks, there's no gates, because that's not how they roll.
Yeah. So on it, like there's an entire medical facility, an entire full scale hospital
Yep.
that we didn't actually even walk into and go
No.
into. And it is a massive building. That's where their national headquarters is. And so that's where we talked about how we owed some thanks to people that helped us with the archives and stuff. There's an entire admin building.
Yes.
I think 4 stories or 5 stories.
And there's
That
a whole
is-
training center that you actually didn't go through where they do a lot of large trainings and host events. It's really, really neat. It's right next to this lake, so you can watch, the ducks around there. You can look at the cornfield.
The geese?
The geese. Excuse me.
No, sorry, there's ducks, but the geese. Do you remember the geese? You're just like, I smell them. That was
Quite
talking about.
intensive. It's quite intense. But you also have where Pat works and where his team is located is the Behavioral Health Center. And this is this beautiful building that they did a capital campaign raise for 10 years ago. I think, what did they raise? $12 million for this building?
Roughly. I don't remember exactly.
And what's so cool about it is they've seen over 5,000 clients and families since they've opened this building. They are routinely voted the best counseling, the best treatment center in the city of Omaha. And this is through almost zero marketing, but it's a place that's become actually a really important part of the entire community.
I'll see if I can pull a clip of that, because I remember Pat said he was sitting inside of a restaurant locally, and someone was like, "Hey, is this you all? Like you and
Yep.
what you're doing?" He's like, "Oh, look at that. That's cool. We were voted."
Yeah, no, and when you walk into the behavioral health center, there's this huge atrium, and on the second floor you can see there's all this beautiful, there's a library, and there's all this kind of craftsman wood paneling and lights. And again, it's just a very inviting place, even though the people that are coming here have really, really intensive needs and problems. And for a lot of people, they are in a crisis point. But that's just not the feeling you get there. It's just that everyone is calm. Everyone is welcoming. The first thing that happens when you walk into these doors is someone greets you. Hey, thanks for coming. Can I help you? Do you need something? And Pat has talked about this in some of his research articles before, that what we don't always capture in behavior analysis is what happens in the margins. And so to define in the margins, it would be that exact experience we had at Boys Town, which is not that, okay, this is, super, this is treatment that's very, has high rates of efficacy. It's that when I'm coming here as a family, I'm immediately welcomed. I have a comfortable place, to sit. People care about the things that are happening with my child or myself. And that's part of that whole experience. And I truly believe that we could really take a page out of the Boys Town playbook in terms of how we better develop our bedside manner, so to speak, in behavior analysis, because understanding that like treatment efficacy is just one piece of what we do, but the whole experience for everybody is really going to be what impacts them and makes them really willing to participate in behavior analytic intervention.
I totally agree. So I'm kind of imagining as we're kind of circling around this campus now, you'd mentioned that there was a full-on visitor center.
Yes.
And my understanding is like there's that, and then there's the Hall of History.
Yes.
That have essentially captured as much as they can and retain as much as they can of the institutional knowledge of what's gone on since it opened, I believe, around 1914.
Right, because Boys Town has been around for over 100 years. And what's really cool in the Hall of History is you see that first, small house that Father Flanagan started for these orphaned wild boys in Omaha. And then you can really watch the, kind of growth of Boys Town as, it started to gain more prominence. And again, all of this is based on his whole philosophy of like, hey, there's no such thing as a bad boy. No such thing as a bad boy, which is like fundamentally like behavior analysis, right? Like we are products of our environment. And Father Flanagan said, okay, you're not a bad kid. You've just had bad training, bad environment. And there's one more thing. It's
bad teaching.
Bad teaching. So if we can correct that, then we believe that you can actually do great things. And that's what they've been able to do over and over again for years and years and years. And also what a powerful message to people that in this like kind of, society right now where we're shaming and blaming people and, people make mistakes. And so fundamentally you are a terrible person and you're an awful person. They're like, hey, guess what? It's not about that. But if we can actually bring you effective intervention that, addresses the issues in your environment, that creates different contingencies and motivators and positively reinforces you to do things a different way. And then you do it. And, it's just a powerful story. And you'll hear about this more when we talk to John in our documentary, because he was a resident of Boys Town for 2.5 years.
Yeah. John, so I guess to step back just a little bit, we went out there once and there's this amazing, like we described, the fall leaves, the experience and whatnot. And then on morning one, immediately we ran into, Pat wasn't feeling too hot.
But it was beyond not feeling hot. We were actually, and I'm going to speak about this really candidly because Pat shared this and I don't think that he will mind. We got to Boys Town. We were filming a section where, Pat and I were working out in the gym because this is something that we do when we hang out together. It's fun. Also, he's in incredible shape for his age. Just makes me so angry, but like whatever.
Yeah, he's beast, dude.
He is a beast.
Beast mode.
But we're literally filming and he is taking breaks to vomit in between takes because that's how sick he was.
Yeah.
And so by the next day, he ended up having to go to, or not the next day, was it 2 days later?
It was the next day.
The next day he had to be hospitalized.
Which is included in the trailer that drops this week.
Yep.
I don't want to make anybody think that like he's not all right. He's doing great right now.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where we showed up, we're like, oh, we're figuring this out. We're going to record with Pat, try to share the Boys Town experience. Day one, some
he
issues.
Is not doing too hot.
Day two, shoot's canceled. We're going home. Like we're done. You bought a flight back early.
Yep.
Changed your flight, and we were like, okay, I guess what we can see about doing, some pickup shots around campus and things like that to show off what it is that's going on. But I learned pretty early on, like, stuff changes quick.
Well, it was so funny because there was just like no way for us to foresee this. And of course, Pat felt terrible, but there's nothing he could do. He just had this like bizarre bug and he needed to, go to the hospital to get some fluids and he's fine. But there was just totally no way we could have predicted it.
I remember we had texted about this and you're like, this might be a blessing in disguise in a sense, because that's where we realized the possibility of inviting some other people onto this to record to see where that would go. John was one, another gentleman named Peter as well. So we could start to explore these sort of opportunities.
I think it worked out, even though it's very unfortunate that he got sick. But the next time we came back around, I was like, oh, we have so much more content now.
Yeah.
We're a little bit more prepared. Yeah.
No, I agree.
And thanks for taking that financial hit.
Yeah, you're welcome. Because I was like, what was that? We need to pay for an entire second trip. And I now have to go to a cold place, which I like actively avoid cold places in December. But honestly, it's the kind of thing, like you could tell me that is a deep freeze in Nebraska. And if I'm going to Boys Town to see Pat, I will put on my warm pants and go because that's how great it is.
As our bougie producer that's used to
Yes.
used to
Cali
those
weather.
Cali weather.
that warm Cali weather. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So to hop back onto campus, there's not one but two churches, I believe, they're on campus as
Yes.
well.
And what's interesting is we were there Sunday morning, and I didn't realize how many people within the community regularly attend the
was
church
insane.
at Boys Town. I mean, it was packed, and Pat was saying that to us, like, "Oh, these church services are packed to the gills every week." The community is very active in supporting Boys Town, and again, because there's no gates, there's no locks, you can just drive on and park and attend the service. And also what's really neat in one of the churches is it's also where Father Flanagan is entombed. And so when you walk into the church, if you go to the right of the church, you actually can see his tomb. They have all types of interesting quotes, pictures. But the room that he's in, and you'll see this in the documentary a little bit, is the way that they've arranged it in terms of how the light filters in. Did you guys notice this? It was almost, and I don't want to be like too, like religiously, but it was almost like there was just like an angelic kind of like soft glow halo around the area. And if you see in the footage, Pat and I automatically like both kind of lower the tone of our voices.
Yeah, no, you
we
both
kind
did.
of talk just
Yeah.
automatically like this. And part of this is just out of like reverence and respect. But also because the environment occasions that behavior, was really like the SD for us to just kind of soften and appreciate. And you have to understand, Father Flanagan died very young. I want to say he was in his early 50s, and he actually died in Germany. It was really interesting. So they had to bring his body, and he's Irish, but they had to bring his body back to entomb it. But the impact that he had, really not just in the United States, but also globally. And you see this with some of the information, both in the Hall of History and then also around his tomb in the church. I mean, it was pretty amazing. He met with all types of different world leaders, and truly, I mean, talk about someone that knew how to like do public relations and communications.
Yeah.
He did a brilliant job of bringing awareness to this little town in the middle of the United States, in the state of Nebraska, the kind of public awareness they were able to do. I mean, obviously Spencer Tracy received an Academy Award for portraying Father Flanagan in a movie about Boys Town. I mean, come on, can you imagine if he was still around today in social media? Father Flanagan would be killing it in the social media game.
I imagined him with like a phone and TikTok going right
for
now
sure.
or something like that.
Gary Vee has nothing on Father Flanagan.
Yeah, I mean, like, we got some B-roll footage from Boys Town, and then there was like a few like well-produced, at least back in the day. It was he has a little bit of video and like
Yeah.
a little bit of acting going on too.
Yeah. It was, I remember when we asked for the archives, opened them up, and we're clicking around, and I was like, there's videos from the 1940s? Like, this guy was on top of his game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was, I think, a 40s, a 50s, and or maybe two 50s videos that when we opened up and we started looking at, I don't know. I feel like sometimes I get a little bit picky about this, but like when you get someone else's footage and you haven't shot it, and you're looking at it, you're just like, man, this is probably gonna be like really cool, but not good enough to fit. And I remember when we were looking at it and we're like, this works. Checking out, we're like, we could use this. Like, this just like leveled up what it is that we're doing.
But
and it was because of
also-
that foresight, and it was because of like the systems that they built there.
Right. And also, I mean, honestly, I would really encourage, behavior analytic organizations, take a page out of the Father Flanagan playbook. The fact that he had these relationships with politicians, with high society people, with board members, with international leaders, allowed him to grow Boys Town and to really expand the impact that they were able to have and then can continue to have. And so often I think in our field, we think that bringing attention to ourselves or talking about ourselves is too promotionally or too promoty. But if we don't have a way and a mechanism to disseminate what we do, how do we make sure that we can reach a larger audience? And Pat, has a lot of articles where he's talked about, gosh, this is, we're really doing such a great job, and especially related to clients that receive behavior analytics service that are diagnosed with autism. But that's the tail of the distribution curve. Imagine the impact we could have if we were focusing on things like anxiety and how we can have a functional approach to treating different types of emotional issues. And so Father Flanagan, again, I think, was such a visionary and ahead of his time, understanding that he needed to leverage what they were doing at Boys Town and really needed to be very outward facing in order to allow them to be able to raise money to really broaden their impact. And that was crucial. And he did such a great job at it. And they've done such a great job of preserving it at Boys Town. It's really, gosh, how neat.
Yeah, that history hall, so cool, right?
Yeah, and I like how Pat described Father Flanagan. He said that he was a great marketer, and yeah, he killed it, man.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, like you said, if he was here now, man,
game over.
Yeah, social media game, dude. He'd be YouTube, TikTok, wherever, Snapchat.
Yeah, I'm like literally imagining someone like Gary Vaynerchuk with the resources and like strategy that he has, but with Father Flanagan and like combined, that would just be insane to watch what would happen.
But also, but Father Flanagan, but it was mission focused. And so I think it's also another great exemplar that you can be this big personality, you can market what you're doing and be focused on a mission. It doesn't mean that you are trying to drive your own personal brand, but really what he wanted to do and what he understood was, there should be no limits to the type of reach that the, fantastic work at Boys Town has. But in order to be able to share that with people, you have to be able to be out there and talking about it and talking to all different types of stakeholders. And that's where I think that we've really failed as a field right now is we like to talk to ourselves all the time. We're like this constant echo chamber. And Father Flanagan talked to all other types of people and really understanding that in order to grow, you need to galvanize your community of stakeholders. And that's clients, that's parents, that's community leaders, it's business people, it's people, socialites, it's politicians. And he did a really good job of that.
I was gonna say this is one of the first projects that I feel like there's a respectable amount of pressure that I'm really putting on myself in my head in a way of trying to make sure that people outside of the field are the ones that we're impressing the most on this sort of thing, right? Like it's folks that are members of the Catholic Church potentially, or speech pathology or occupational therapy, psychologists. Like I want to see if what it is that we're working on is impressing on them, right? And interesting to them. Cause it's, I don't know, like we need to build those bridges in a sense, which is what I kind of feel like, like work on our internal structure, but also, I guess I experienced that for 10 years and now it's like, okay, how are we going to do this? So for example, little things like someone was asking me the other day about how it was working with somebody on a big edit like this. And because I'm used to like taking the workload oftentimes on my own. And I was like, it's really cool, but it's also weird because there'll be things where Jarek's like, no, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, wait, I would do the opposite. But it's like, nope, like there's no answer here. Like, shut up. Jarek's got experience in this area far beyond you. Let him make the cut or whatever it is that we're going to do. And like, we'll see how it works. So I'm excited potentially to see like what I learn in this as well on what you're talking about on what we need to do internally, but how do we start to take that step outward to communicate a message that's not our own, but something we believe in. And it requires that outside perspective. That's not a behavior analyst.
Yeah.
Really. And that's who we're trying to communicate to at the end of this.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think that's where I kind of come into is if I do watch this doc, even if I'm not the one that edited it, I would still enjoy it because I would still understand, especially Pat is a very great communicator. Because I've been to a lot of the conferences that Ryan drags me into. I mean, I'm not like, I don't want to talk anything like badly about it, but I don't understand what's happening in those PowerPoints and presentations.
But even Pat talked about that. Remember when we were filming, he said, He's like, if I'm one of the most senior people in the field and I'm attending a talk and I literally have no idea what you're talking about, think about the rest of the audience that likely hasn't been in the field for 40 years, doesn't have a PhD, and hasn't authored over 192 different research projects and journal articles. He's like, we got a problem here, people.
Part of his, I guess, like what we're talking about here, this theme of like collaboration a little bit and like working with others. What I found interesting from him and is that he actually leans on and like looks to people that are up giving sermons, right? For his like speaking skill sets. And he tries to model actually. It's like he's not only talking about how we need to build bridges, but also he actively looks for in everybody or different fields, right? What can I bring in that will enhance my practice?
Oh, sure. And if you have read any of Pat's articles or have talked to him, you'll know that one of his biggest inspirations are televangelists. He's like, oh my gosh, talk about a galvanizing message. Why, watch that old school stuff on the television. I mean, these are people that are able to raise millions of dollars and, fill these churches. And I love how Pat often uses religious metaphors to make secular points. But part of that, again, is born out of the fact that he's really, looked at the speaking style of televangelists and that so much of what he does. And if you watch him speak, you'll notice this. It's performance as well as, content. And that's where I think, if we want to do a better job in behavior analysis, or frankly, if any discipline wants to do a better job of getting their message out there, understanding that you need to be engaging the audience, you need to have the audience give a crap about what you're saying, and you need to establish their engagement with you immediately when you step on that stage. So what are some of the very specific things that you can do? Pat also emphasizes, how important it is to practice. And he puts in, hours and hours before every presentation that he does. And that's evident in his speaking. And also I've noticed of late, he's really migrated off of using PowerPoints. And when people watch the documentary, they'll see him talk about this a little bit, that, a picture's worth 1,000 words, but, someone coming up to the front of the room is worth 1,000 pictures or something to that effect. And so I think he, is really a great exemplar of how, similar to Father Flanagan, like, how do we do this? How do we make our, message resonate? How do we make it interesting, make it engaging, and also understand that part of this is a performance piece?
Yeah, because I remember when Ryan came in and told me about this project, I was like, he told me that Pat is like one of the big dudes on the field. And he was like, if you don't understand this guy, then there's no hope in our field.
Yeah.
So,
I
have very low expectation. I was like, it's just going to be one of those things. I'm just going to go there and film and, not necessarily pay attention.
You guys are paying me, right?
Yeah. And then
You'll give me all the coffee I need. So I'm not falling asleep during
Coffee,
this.
food,
Exactly.
and paid. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the moment he started speaking, I was just, this is interesting. Like, I'm actually paying attention to what he was talking about. And I understood it too. It's like, it wasn't very technical. It was very general for,
and I was gonna say there's a number of people. I was literally gonna bring that point up right when you did. But there's a number of people in our field that I think also embody those sort of skill sets and like have that history and know how to do similar types of things as to like what you're describing and how we can communicate to others. But this was the one where it was like, I know him. We have an opportunity here. Sarah knows him really well. The stars were kind of lining up where how he reached out to the CMO on site, and they're just like, yeah, go for it, green light. There was just so many things lining up where I was like, hey man, like there's really no restrictions from Pat, his skills, to what we can and can't do. Like if we can't do it with this one, then I feel like that was the best opportunity I've ever had to potentially tell a good story from top to bottom. I haven't even thought about this. This gets a little off track, but like where we're going next, maybe something we can talk about at the very end of this season on this podcast. Okay. But there's, I do think there's other opportunities out there as well. But I don't know, I'm really appreciating that it takes a lot of variables to come together.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of variables.
That's like the understatement of the century. A lot of variables to come together.
So are we missing anything with the campus to paint the picture? I mean, we mentioned there's a high school, there's speech pathology, entire buildings and things set up for services like that. There's
Let's talk about their gym though,
Yeah.
because they have this great gymnasium and they have this old school weight room. So if you go into the gym, you have to go into one of the main basketball courts and you have to walk up the stairs to this old school weight room. And the football coach has an office there, and I remember seeing him in the fall. He was really great. By the way, their record was phenomenal. And Boys Town football always does really well. And something to keep in mind with this is that they're playing teams of kids that have been together and often been playing together for years. And most of these kids at Boys Town have maybe known each other for a couple weeks, a couple months, depending on how long they've been a resident. And the fact that they can coalesce as a group and perform at the level that they do is tremendous. But also part of the reason the Boys Town weight room is so important is because that's where Pat starts out every day at 3:30 in the morning. He is there in the pitch black from 3:30 until 5:30 pumping iron. And Pat said that they got a lot of their equipment donated by kind of local gyms and supporters. But you walk into it and it just like smells like a locker room. It smells like teenage boy, and there's weights clanking.
Yeah, it's got that like Olympic weightlifting vibe of like, and everything's beat up and used. It's got that.
It's history, man.
Yeah, no, that weight room has seen a lot.
So much. And so that was really fun for us to go, in October when on our first trip out there. And of course for me, because I'm super competitive, I was like, I'm going to go toe to toe with Pat on push-ups. And I believe I might have matched him that day. That's only because he was very ill.
Hey, you matched him. That's what matters.
I know. And even Pat was just like, because I had worked out with him about 7 months earlier in Arizona, and he's like, okay, you're up in your game. I was like, Pat, I've been training for this shit. I knew we were coming in October, and I was not going to let you beat me.
So that's actually perfect. I want to play a clip, actually.
Okay.
That's not included in currently anything we're putting out. I don't think it's going to be out there. And it's because of some like technical issues that we ran into on site. But it has him in the weight room after him vomiting and you laying next to him. I guess there's the vomit's in the trash can, to be clear there. But
I'm not laying in the vomit.
He's laying down because he's not feeling well, and you're laying down next to him. And there's a discussion going on about Boys Town. So let me cue that up real quick.
What about, you said that the boys are also really reinforced by the motivational system. Can you tell me about it?
Well, it's a point system. They're on a token economy. And the kids come and they start off in what's called a daily system. So they earn their daily privileges on a daily system. Each night they have to have enough points in order to buy the following day's privileges.
Yeah.
Privileges are just routine stuff, watching TV, being able to go to the field house where we are right now, hanging out with friends, going in for a movie, just freedom to come and go.
Sure.
So that's a daily system. Now kids can never go in the hole.
Okay, so there's no like response cost, like you're going to
No.
miss out on privileges for multiple days. You just earn them or you don't.
They do everything they can, the family teachers, to get these kids to earn points if they haven't made their points.
Okay.
Because they're point awards and point fines, but kids don't go in the hole.
Okay.
And they get a lot of opportunities to make points up if they're not going to make their privileges. After they've accumulated a certain amount of points, they keep them in kind of a bank, surplus points. They can buy their way onto day or to weekly. That way they earn their privileges on a weekly level.
Okay.
And then while on weekly, if they save up enough points, and they do, they can buy their way on what's called achievement. That means there's no point card. They just come and go by asking for permission. And so the kids that are on achievement are leaders in the community. A lot of achievement kids are on the football team.
How long does it typically take for someone to reach achievement status?
Oh, that can take up to a year. But, really motivated kid who gets the system right off the bat, you might be able to pull it off in 6 months to 9 months. Now, there's a lot of people in this country that are opposed to these what are called point and level systems and want to strip them out of foster care programs. And if people want to eliminate them, they'll eliminate the funding. But you know what? These people don't realize it. We are all on a point and level system.
Yep.
Every single
Whether you know
person.
it or not.
$1's worth 100 points. And so forth. And people, you don't think there are levels? There are levels all throughout our culture, and you ascend to those levels by the accumulation of points. people that are trying to take away our point and level system are on a point and level system, and they're benefiting from it tremendously. People that are opposed to external rewards to motivate kids that aren't motivated other ways, they want to strip away those external rewards, but they themselves, they're very handsomely rewarded externally.
Right.
So there's a lot of hypocrisy there, and then straight up ignorance. A failure to understand really the essence of behavior analysis, which is found in this program. You know, we arrange circumstances to motivate our kids. We use words like character. That makes sense because it describes the whole body of characteristics that a human being has as they interact with the world. But we activate those characteristics, you know, externally by how we talk and how we act and the kinds of results that occur from interactions, the kinds of results that a kid produces. That activates those elements that we call character. But that stuff has to be languaged too. That's what that stuff is on the wall. That's just languaging it for kids.
Right.
Kind of bring it to life, make it more vivid, give it some blood, sweat, and tears so they can relate to it in a physical way, and maybe an emotional way, and even a spiritual way. And when I say spiritual, you know, some people think otherworldly, and I don't know if it's that. I think of spiritual not as otherworldly, but other-selfly. Like
Yes.
you're out of yourself, you're thinking about something beyond yourself.
Yes.
That to me is the essence of spirituality. And I think that our kids, when they're playing football with each other, they get that. They're playing for Father Flanagan.
What I find really interesting there is that they're embodying like a really comprehensive system.
Yeah.
And what Pat's talking about here is that although they're in potentially a very air quote restrictive environment where it's a very intense thing that you show up there because you have these intense needs is what I mean by that. Yeah, you know, you're living with a family potentially that gets completely uprooting you in a sense. It's integrated, and what he's describing here is they're tying it back into getting you ready for life, getting you ready for that economic system that you're about to be hopping into through things like this.
Well, and that we draw sometimes these like arbitrary lines of, and we hear this all the time in behavior analysis, you guys bribe people to do things, but we are all motivated by specific things. Our behavior is totally rule-based and governed by our environment, and whether, you know, it's conscious or subconscious, like we're all pressing levers, you know what I mean? And I think that Pat was making that point is we have this articulated system, and to think that it's somehow, you know, you're setting the residents of Boys Town up for failure by going from like daily to weekly, you know, to the highest level, which is basically like open privileges all the time. And that somehow this is, you know, contrived, and that's not how the real world works. Well, that's exactly how the real world works.
Yeah.
They've just done a really good job of operationally defining what it is at Boys Town. And again, the results speak for themselves.
Can we just, real quick, like the average length of stay kind of dosage, can you just give us a snapshot of what that is? Because I know Pat describes it. We're going to have it out there. But
Yes.
This is something that's, I think, a little more in depth than what people are used to when it comes to receiving psychological services, behavior analytic services.
Well, part of what people need to understand is part of the reason the family teaching model has been really effective is because it's a really cost-effective method of intervention. And there's been a tremendous amount of studies. Boys Town is not the only place that uses the family teaching model as a primary way to intervene with children that are coming from trauma-based backgrounds. And so the average length of stay, what they're seeing at Boys Town is it's decreasing as funding for quote unquote residential programs has fallen out of favor because of people's assumptions of what that looks like. And in the documentary, Pat really talks about that. Like, hey, if you're typically thinking about a residential program, again, you're thinking dormitories, you know, kids stacked like sardines in beds, you know, staff with, you know, keychains and locks all around. And it's this austere kind of cold environment. And Boys Town is not that. But they've really had to combat kind of prevailing thoughts on, you know, institutional care, and that it's fallen out of favor. And so politicians and other people that are, you know, kind of decision makers in terms of where state dollars go, because a lot of states fund these programs for these residents. I don't believe that they have a large portion of residents that are here with privately paying for it. A lot of this is funded by the different state systems and also by insurance. So what they've seen happening over time is that these stays are getting shorter and shorter. And Pat makes this point that they feel like it's very, very important for the residents to be able to stay at Boys Town and graduate with a high school diploma. That diploma is key for the trajectory of the residents in terms of their futures, that they really have had enough time.
And there's research backing that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, like, for example, John, who we talked to, was a resident of Boys Town in the 70s, and I think for 2.5 years. But I want to say the average length of stay is maybe more around like 18 months, but really, and John talks about this too, that 2 years is really, people feel like that's a really nice number where you get optimal outcomes.
So what else do we need to finish to kind of like close out painting the picture of this Boys Town campus?
Let's talk about the food at the cafeteria in the visitor center, because I'm telling you, I didn't have like high hopes, frankly. I mean, for the cuisine in Nebraska in general, but you go to this like visitor center cafeteria and they're like bringing people on buses to come visit. But there's two kind of really cool things that happen at the visitor center. One, is that the staff and residents of Boys Town eat there too. And so visitors get to interact with everybody. And it's just like this super open, welcoming environment. Two, they have these like really good wraps that they make. And I remember when we were there in December with Pat, we were all starving. I believe none of us actually uttered a word while we were ingesting those wraps for lunch. They were delightful. And it's just like super cool. And on Friday, the current head of Boys Town, and oh my gosh, what is his father? Who is the current president of Boys Town?
I don't know.
Okay, we need to research this. I can't believe I can't remember off the top of my head. He'll often come in and have lunch on Friday, and he might, call upon some of the new residents, just kind of talk about like, hey, why am I here? What am I doing? They'll speak to the visitors. But again, it's just this like interactive community experience where there's no like distinctions between like visitors or staff or residents. It's just this like great place to be, and like no one is above or below anyone else. Like everyone's really on the same level, and it's fun. It's just like this like cool dynamic lunchroom. There's no like mean girls table. It's just like, hey, come sit down, interact with people, and it's really amazing. And the wrap was stupendous.
I guess we talked about the church, we talked about the whole history. There's a number of other buildings we didn't necessarily walk into, but there's also, I would say, if I had to roughly guess, I don't know what the number is, but probably looked like there was about 50-ish homes that are on campus there, right?
Yeah, and they're all really nice. I mean, they have, tree houses
Ridiculously
outside,
nice. Yeah.
slides. And again, you have to remember in the family teaching model, these are families that live at Boys Town. And so the residents are living with families that have between 1, 2, or 3 children, which is fantastic. Father Bose is the current president.
Cool.
Father Bose. Yeah.
Anything else, Jack? On like this sort of segment of painting the picture? Was there anything that caught your eye or anything like that?
I really like the houses. Like when we drove past that, during that time, the first time we went, it was around October.
It was right after Halloween.
Yeah,
was
so
right
there was
after
still
Halloween.
a little bit of Halloween theme going on over there, which is cool. And yeah, I think, and the water tower, that's pretty dope.
Oh, and you guys got some sick drone shots.
I was
too.
gonna say, you'll be seeing
sick drone
you'll
shots.
seeing plenty of the water tower.
Yeah.
It's just too picturesque. All right, so let's wrap this up. This is coming out on Tuesday. If you listen to this live, if you make sure that what you do is you set your alarms for Thursday, March 5th, is the release of the trailer. So this is coming out this week. Super stoked. Could not be more hyped about it. I really think that everything lives up to what is in the trailer. So that emotional feel that you get, like we're not clickbaiting you, we're not like hyping you. I think it's really going to live up to it.
And it sustains. It really sustains throughout the entire doc.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's it. I don't even remember our closeout now.
We out.
Our sign out.
We out.
We out. That's it. We all right.
Team
We
on
out.
location, we out.
We out.
We out.